Okay, let's talk about reference variables. And basically, since we're talking about creating objects and now mentioning how we can pass objects around, just like we could pass in a primitive type around, like from one method to another. The moment we start doing that, we need to have at least an introductory understanding of what pass by value and pass by reference are. And basically, a pass by reference speaks to reference variables. So let me just show you an example. We've created these classes, right? And now I'm just gonna use the fully qualified constructor here. When I print, let's say I say sout Chevy.toString here, and it'll print, as we've seen before several times, it'll print out the vehicle object that looks like this. But here, instead of in some other method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that Chevy. Now it's called now the variable is no longer called Chevy. Here we're passing a variable called Chevy, but here when it accepts the vehicle as the argument, the object of type vehicle as the argument, it's called V. So now I'm going to say V dot color equal. Let's say we're this is going to be called paint. Let's say we're going to change it to blue, right? And then here, when I say sout Chevy dot toString, when I run this, the first time it prints out, it'll be brown, and the second time it'll be blue. And that seems a little intuitive right now. So, right, the color is brown and the color is blue. But what happened here is this vehicle object, this time with this object named Chevy of type vehicle, when it got passed here, this method does not get its own copy of, or like its own copy of that vehicle object. Anything that it does to that vehicle object will affect the vehicle object in the original method, right? So when this paint method is called, and I can debug it to demonstrate it, it goes down, the flow of execution comes down to this paint method. It does whatever's in this paint method, and then it returns up to here, and it prints, it goes to whatever code is next, right? That's kind of like the flow of execution. It'll start here, go here. This is a method call, so it'll jump into that method. When it's done in this method, it'll jump back out and continue on where it was, right? So right here, if I say step into, now we're in that method, and I'll keep now we're done with that method. Now we come back here, and the original variable of type Chevy, when I print it out, here we can see that it's printed out brown. When I print this out now, it'll print out blue. Because this paint method did not get its own copy of the object. It got a reference to that object in memory. So this Chevy object right here, when we created it, it only gets created one time, and it gets created in memory. And then anytime you pass that object around, all you're doing is passing a reference to that object in memory. What's different about this is that, and I'll just go ahead and stop this, is that if I say int x equals 100, and then let's say I'll create a method here that says public, I think void add value, and here I'm going to say x equals x. Okay, take and just to. I'll just keep this the same name. This variable can have the same name. Like here, it's a variable called x, and this add value takes in a variable called x, but this could be called unicorn. It could be called whatever. So unicorn equals unicorn times 10, right? So all I did in this method was just change the value of the v.color, right? And this vehicle v was passed in, and I just said v.color equal blue. Here, I'm just saying unicorn equals unicorn times 10. But when I sout x right here, and I'll just copy all this out for simplicity right now, it's not going to print out 1,000. It's going to print out 100 because primitive data types like ints are passed by value. So this method got its own copy of this variable, which here it's called x, and when we took it in here, it's called unicorn. So I could do whatever I want with it. I can change it as much as I want. I can modify it. Here I said unicorn equals unicorn times 10. Just to be super clear, I can say x, 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 here I can shout inside add value method and say x equal, just check out the value of x. And then here say inside main method x equal. I still have to call that value and pass this. Here you can see that the print line from add value prints first, right? Because we called that method before this system out, the print line gets called, and it prints out 1,000 because x equals 1,000. But after that add value method has been called back in the original, in this case, main method, the value of x is still 100. So primitive types like ints, longs, doubles, chars, booleans, all that kind of stuff, they're passed by value, meaning when you pass it to another method, that other method can do whatever it wants to it, and it won't affect the original variable in the original method, in this case, x. Objects, on the other hand, like this vehicle v, they're called pass by reference. And when you pass an object to a method, it does not get its own copy of that object. It just gets a reference to that object in memory. And as you play with this a bit more, it'll definitely start to make more sense.